Hi everyone, Kez here, or Alicia for those that know me from this channel. It has been about 3 months or so since I have updated you guys on my final major project, my big production, or my last year of uni, last semester. It's literally over in 3 days. But yeah, I'm going to show you how I went from basically nothing. I hadn't touched Unreal before this project, so since around end of December, January, I started learning the engine, and how I have more or less a demo that's somewhat working to show you guys by the end of this. So, following on from my ideation video, what helped me get from pitch and concepts to a reality check game set tester, it was definitely knowing what I was doing. I did rigorous planning and followed so many tutorials to measure the reality, and then I set achievable and tangible goals to help me progress and get through the stages necessary to get to an end result. I also found a lot of references from other games that I enjoyed playing, which meant that I wasn't starting from a blank canvas. With that being said, it's time to dive into the nitty-gritty of animating and developing this project. My initial attempts at recording reference were... let's not talk about them actually. It was recommended to me that I film my reference outside since there's more open space and it can encourage more natural movement. I ended up directing a friend from the notes I had made on my character's actions based on the events that would occur in the game.
You're looking around, you're trying to avoid the spotlight, okay? You don't like this light.
Okay.
You're
So
prepared
like
for the
hand
journey
over eye,
Yeah.
or like scared, kind of bringing
I think
yourself
like
in.
closed pose,
Like,
and then
that.
maybe like an occasional like I'm hiding from this. I don't want to be seen here.
Okay. Very timid, yeah?
Yeah, very
Okay.
timid.
How exaggerated do you want this? Do you want it quite cartoonish?
Yes, like
Okay.
When all the reference footage was completed and all gameplay actions were covered, they were imported into SyncSketch to make notes over and analyze the movements. Now that this was sorted, it was time for animation blockout. I'm going to give a quick shot breakdown for my idle animation. Since it was the first animation I worked on for the project, I had to ensure everything in layout was set up for me as efficiently as possible for the following animations. This meant adding custom quick select sets to my shelf for convenience when keying poses, and setting up my game export files with some padding, in case I wanted to change the duration of them for my animations later down the line. I worked in step mode to start with here, so that there was no interference from Maya's interpolation, and I could only see my influence on the character through posing. Once I'm happy with this stage of the animation, I play blast out the results to have on record and make notes on where to take it from here, which I can apply to the next stage. At the Blockout Plus stage, I take the animation to events for feedback, and the advice I get is start again. I didn't analyse my reference footage as accurately as I could have the first time around. A lot of the movement just felt confused, so it was back to the drawing board. Well, I guess the animating board. I redid the blockout following the advice given to me by my mentor from the event, with the reference beside the character actually in my Maya perspective to really nail the swaying motion of her hips. This time I worked straight in spline mode, which was definitely better for the outcome. Much better. From this point onwards, it was just about getting myself to polish and more high quality animation. I could animate any fabrics and accessories on the witch and really, I guess, get into the details some more by checking my graph editor and making sure there's no odd jolts in any of the joints and making sure my principles are covered, like arcs and overlap. But yeah, that's it for the idle animation. On to the next one. We come to one of the last animations I started working on. The obtained star animation was going to be a part of the game's ending cutscene, so this one is slightly more technical. Since time was getting on at this point in the project, I had to start thinking about ways I could speed up my workflow. I was getting more used to animating quicker, so this block out looks a lot more well presented than the idle animation might have looked. And to be honest, from here, it didn't need that much work for the polish stage. However, this is a unique case because I had to figure out how this animation would work with elements that I had already imported into Unreal Engine. So I spent a day figuring out how to set up a cutscene, following tutorials that helped out a lot, and basically just trudging along as I go, creating different iterations of the cutscene as well, trying different camera work and camera moves, and from there I figured out what would work best for the kind of atmosphere and energy I wanted for my game. I was advised by my collaborator to try and make the cutscene more interesting by reusing the idle animation to make her look at the star before she does the whole yippee motion. I think initially it was advised because there was a longer audio track that he had made to fit a longer piece of animation, so that was the stand-in for what the finished thing would be. I took that further by looking at inspirational footage from like Mario Galaxy and found some old references I didn't use from last year, I think, and put them to use here. So now the character turns and I wanted the star to like flow around her as if she was having this lovely magical interaction with this object, and it felt like she hadn't been animated outside of Engine. These two elements were actually in one space and working well together. This new reference, along with the motion capture footage I had already been using, really helped me to perfect this animation to the best of my ability by the polish stage. On that note, I want to make it known that this was all hand-keyed animation. At first, I did try experimenting with Cascador's video mocap features and got some pretty cursed results, so we put that to bed very quickly. To summarize a few of the challenges I encountered whilst animating this character, definitely one of them being trying to maintain as much of a character silhouette I could without the arms obstructing her, but also making sure that the arms have enough movement to convey a clear contrast in their characters. I knew a second pair of arms would be a challenge from the start, so I was willing to push through, but I knew that the witch herself was a very shy and reserved character who would have more closed poses, and I wanted the magical arms to be more like her guardian and a character with more presence. Also, for animations where the witch was interacting with her wand or grabbing onto her hat, I had to animate with parent constraints, so that's always an interesting setting to try and battle with, but I think the results were really cool by the end. I had 10 animations by the end, and I had been polishing them up until now, submission, plus I've sent them off for a final round of feedback just so I can make some adjustments before I commit to adding them to my showreel. Now we can move on to developing the game in Unreal Engine. The first step was to make sure I found an environment I could use for my project so I didn't have to model all of my assets from scratch. Referring to my game design document, I continued developing how the mechanics would work, with the stage layout I had decided on using. What helped me consider how I envisioned this working was producing an extremely low-effort previs take of the planned final outcome for the project gameplay demo. I say low effort. By low effort, I meant that the character wasn't animated at all. But apparently this took me 10 hours to sort out. I needed to visualize potential player movement by getting into the space myself, so I drew out a player route map. This is the path I based my previs shots off of. With the level design and environment layout complete, I could move on to making sure that I could implement the mechanics of the game for the demo. One of the key elements was the spotlights, which originally included a sweeping spotlight that ended up being a little too buggy to submit as an end product. I had developed the first blueprints for my spotlights that would damage the player, making them lose a life if caught in the radius of. March 17th was a big day, It was just around the midway deadline I had set myself to get in gear and sort out everything I had been shelving. With the 10 animation blockouts complete by this date, I could really get into Engine and start developing the level further. I added a character animation blueprint for Yastra, the rig I'm using, for when she collides with the trigger radius to perform an animation montage, indicating that she's taking damage and is trying to get away. I attempted to make the spotlight stop when the character overlapped with the trigger radius, but that's where the bugs were occurring and I didn't have the time nor the willpower to keep fighting with the engine. In the end, I settled on flickering lights transitioning between 2 points to lead into a more horror-centric atmosphere. Here we have a few things I did to try and make the game feel more gamey. I imported 2 star models, one for the completion of the level and another as an extra collectible, and spread collectibles around the level that vary in difficulty to obtain. Orbs are virtually everywhere, courage stars are rarer and harder to obtain, and the hope star is the only one of its kind. The player has to get through a parkour course and reach the star, which is required to complete the level. These stars and orbs would be collected, well, in reality they would be destroyed, when the character interacts with them. At this stage I also attempted to implement an interaction point, so that the character could levitate platforms, but for now, if you press the specified button, the character performs a spell. There's an animation montage linked to the character blueprint in the settings. I had a lot of fun texturing the stars. I did enjoy playing around with the different material effects and lighting throughout the development of this. There was definitely a specific aesthetic I wanted to achieve, and I'm very lucky that this environment could help me emulate that. Also at this stage I tried to make my cutscenes feel more cinematic and cohesive with the game by adding some fade in and out effects, and there's a cool comparison for before the development of this game in Engine to where it is now. I will be posting the final demo as a standalone video, so please check my channel feed to see what all of this rambling has actually amounted to. Now, I'd like to take some time to mention my collaborator, Alex Lee, who helped with the implementation of technical audio for the spotlights, Foley, and ambience within Engine for my game. You can check out his work on this project in the video's description. I had this idea around the start of this project to create a fun and interactive animation showcase within the level itself. So I thought of a secret platform underneath the water simulation that would have this gallery of all the gameplay animations I've created, just for funsies. So that's what's going on in this video footage here. And that is all. This was part 2 of my final production documentation, from nothing to something. Thank you so much for watching and sticking through the whole video. We'll catch up on the next video. Bye bye!